Yeah, hi folks. Yes, our dear leader Jacinda has the audacity to say she governs for all New Zealanders. Meanwhile, Judith Collins gets rolled and she can't figure out why when the answer is obvious. She stands for nothing and she does nothing. Her whole party stands for nothing except be Labour light. She's a typical entitled politician, just like Hillary Clinton. Right now, our biggest problem in New Zealand is separatism, and she only tinkers around the edges on that. Anyway, back to Jacinda.
Look, Ryan, it's actually really straightforward. If you've got a vaccine pass, you can do everything. Basically, That's it.
Except concerts will leave the region.
Large-scale gatherings have limits on them, but people are used to that from the alert level system.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the roadmap, Stage 3, Phase 3. Is it possible we could see changes this week that you'll decide at Cabinet today for hospitality businesses, for example?
Yeah. For the stage 3, we've already said that we consider that to be unlikely. Of course, Cabinet takes continual review of the settings for any part of the country that are in those higher restrictions. But because we are so close to flipping into the new framework, and because we have had a number of examples of easing, we're wanting to just make sure that those are bedding in, that we're seeing those case numbers, continue to be under control. That bodes really well for us then when we see the big easing that will happen after the 29th. So the 29th of November is the day that Cabinet meets and determines where the whole country will be in the new framework. And Auckland shifts, and that means basically everything reopens. So that's the date we've suggested to businesses they work towards. That's the thing that has certainty around it. Again, Cabinet will give some consideration to the meantime, but we're not expecting significant changes now.
And yet they should expect those businesses, because I've spoken to a few of them at the weekend, particularly in hospitality, they should expect that within a day or two of the 29th, it would be in the traffic light.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
All right, let's move to Groundswell. And when you became Prime Minister, they have pointed out to me this morning that you said you would govern for the whole country, for everyone. Have you met with Groundswell?
I meet with farming leaders amongst the group that I meet with the most regularly, and that includes federated farmers, it includes Beef and Lamb, it includes Dairy New Zealand, it includes FOMA, it includes a wide range of primary sector leaders. I have not specifically met with the individuals who have organised these protests, but I know that there are some of the groups that I meet with may have people that attend.
Do you think there are a bunch of racists and anti-vaxxers?
Has he met with the representatives of Groundswell, the movement for farmers and rural communities across New Zealand?
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, I'm not too sure what Groundswell stands for these days. Is it they're a member of it's a mixture of well, that is based on what I've read on their website, and it's a mixture of racism, anti-vax, etc., etc. But
no.
Do you think Stuart Nash's comment to that effect was inappropriate?
Oh, look, Minister Nash has expressed a view. It's not one I share.
She never takes responsibility for anything.
But when it comes to the issues that, I think it's probably fair if I speak to the issues that Groundswell perhaps originally were calling for action around, because it seems like some of what's occurred since has been a bit more muddied. But what they were originally calling for, on my mind, are absolutely issues that we're being addressing. But when you say, Ryan, that I need to govern for all New Zealand, I stand by that.
So she governs for all New Zealanders. Yet just 3 minutes ago she said this.
Look, Ryan, it's actually really straightforward. If you've got a vaccine pass, you can do everything.
Yeah, right there she's alienated at least 20% of voters, 10% of the unvaxxed, and at least 10% of the people she has forced to get the vaccine via the vaccine passport.
But when you say, Ryan, that I need to govern for all New Zealand, I stand by that.
Thousands of farmers brought their tractors and utes into our cities again today to protest against a raft of new regulations. The nationwide demonstration, dubbed Mother of All Protests by organisers, comes amid growing pushback from the rural sector. Logan Church reports.
Farmers out in force, swapping the farm for city centres, fighting for the government's attention.
It's like the kids have locked all the adults out of the cockpit. They're not listening to anyone.
Make her turn go away.
Make a turn go away. Good on you, Carol.
In Auckland, a convoy of tractors and utes.
We're just putting the pressure on all the time, constantly, and we're not getting any answers.
Farmers are now clogging up Queen streets. Many here furious, saying they're drowning under a pile of government regulation.
They're going to starve if they don't back us.
Many concerned about a new tax on petrol vehicle imports.
We need utes. There's no other alternative.
As well as upcoming Three Waters reform.
It's really bringing our town and country together. It's something that actually affects all of us.
Concern right around the country. In Wanaka, braving the rain in Greymouth.
As you can see, it's a pretty wet, miserable day, but it's still not going to deter people from coming out and telling the government that enough is enough.
Even Stewart Island. Meanwhile, in Christchurch, David Seymour mounting this tractor.
Yeah, so why didn't Collins mount the tractor? And she wonders why ACT goes up in the polls and National goes down.
When this government said it would unite New Zealand, it managed to unite urban and rural against the government.
Not sure how many people are here at the moment, but there's at least a couple of thousand. I would suspect it's closer to 5,000.
In Wellington, climate protesters protesting the protest.
Help farmers to transition.
We care about farmers. We know where our food comes from. But we can't have food at the price of wrecking the planet.
Before police asking them to move.
If I can ask you nicely just to move aside to let the traffic go through. Okay? Yeah, thank you.
But the farmers' message to the government clear.
Just back off and give us some space and trust that what we are doing is a good thing.
With dire consequences, they say, if they're not listened to.
But when you say, Ryan, that I need to govern for all New Zealand, I stand by that.
A few thousand people, they said. Yeah, and hat tip to look in for that one, and the link is below.
But when you say, Ryan, that I need to govern for all New Zealand, I stand by that.
Now, joining us from New Zealand is Casey Costello. Casey has been a strong advocate on the need for New Zealanders to be treated equally before the law, regardless of race or ethnicity. Casey is a former detective sergeant with New Zealand Police, and she was vice president of the New Zealand Police Association. She's on the board of the New Zealand Taxpayers Union, who lobby for lower taxes, and she is a founding trustee of Hobson's Pledge, I'll tell you about that in a second, who advocate for equality before the law in New Zealand, regardless of race. Casey is strongly opposed to what she views as the racist policies being pursued by the Jacinda Ardern government. She joins us now. Casey, great to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Really good. Now, just quickly explain to us what Hobson's Pledge is and why you believe it is so important right now in New Zealand.
Well, we started about 2016, before the 2017 election, and it was just that there was a real drive in New Zealand that we were being differentiated based upon our ancestry, and we just sort of felt that we were losing the fabric of New Zealand, and we needed a correction, and we needed an understanding that we were, we're one nation, we're one people. That's what the treaty assured us of. Only there's been a real shift because of a number of interpretations since 1840 that have allowed us to sort of be shifted into this idea that we're a partnership, that we're a nation of two peoples, and therefore there is a differentiation on how we're treated, which worries us.
So Hobson was the guy who originally signed the treaty, correct, between the Maoris and the Brits when they arrived. Your proud heritages of both sides of the New Zealand racial makeup. So tell us why you think that is being torn apart. Which specific policies is the Ardern government pursuing that you have a problem with?
Well, it's been a real shift. It's almost like you get punch drunk with all the stuff that's going on. So since 2019, when the He Puapua report was produced, which was produced under the guise of we're just reaffirming our commitment to the treaty, but what's happened since that report was commissioned, Jacinda Ardern has, as our Prime Minister, determined that report wasn't made publicly available because she didn't want it to be interpreted as government policy. But when you go through the report since 2019, a lot of the ideas and concepts of that report have been shifted into legislation. We've had a revamp of our education and training legislation, which was in 2019. We've had a change in democratic process around the establishment of Māori wards in local government, which was an over the night, literally in 3 days, legislation change that removed a democratic process of referendum. And then lately it's just increased in speed. We've had the introduction of the Three Waters reform legislation, which is effectively removing control and ownership of water from the local bodies and councils that own those assets into these massive entities that will be 50% controlled by iwi. Bearing in mind New Zealand Māori population is only 17%.
But when you say, Ryan, that I need to govern for all New Zealand, I stand by that.
Chantel has been outspoken on COVID regulations, on changing New Zealand's name to the unpronounceable Aratoria or whatever, and the disturbing Three Waters Bill, and more broadly on censorship of the media under what is clearly the socialist government of Jacinda Ardern. Chantel joins us now. Chantel,
Hi,
great to see
Rowan.
you.
Thank you.
How are you? Now, before we start, Amy Brooke, writing in The Spectator, had a good article about, no, we are not Oratoria or whatever we are, but she came up with this line, and I need you to translate it for me because I have no idea what it is. Create your own pepeha to celebrate Te Wiki o Te Rio movement. Don't you speak English in New Zealand anymore? And what does that mean?
To be honest, I haven't actually heard that line, so I couldn't tell you, and I'm not fluent in Māori, but what I would say is we do have a real culture here that does I would say, that honours the Indigenous people of New Zealand, and we...
Now, I wish people would stop calling Maori Indigenous when they are not.
We do see the Indigenous Māori as warriors, and we are actually quite united, but I think there's a lot of legislation at the moment that is choosing to try and cause division between Māori and between Pākehā, and the rate of I would say 100% Māori here is very low, but
I would say none.
it doesn't really mean that that shouldn't be honoured. It just means that we've got a lot of people that are a bit of both. And so what we need to do is look at ways that we can move forward in a united front rather than a divisive front.
Yep, exactly.
And I think what we've seen under Jacinda's government is a push to be a divisive country. And that's not what we need when we're coming up across much larger problems than just renaming our country.
Well, what, are you going to rename your country? Is that a democratic thing to do? Has it been voted on? Is it going to be called Aotearoa, whatever?
Yeah, the name is Aotearoa, but what it is I personally, and I know a lot of people are the same, am not too worried if there is a vote and the majority vote to rename the country. What concerns me is what we're seeing at the moment, where there is no democratic process. So we're seeing all of our national channels, like our transport agency, our libraries, everything like that are changed to have Māori names. They're wanting to change Māori names to every single city, to every single town in New Zealand. But the only problem with that is that there hasn't been a democratic vote for that to happen. And that's what concerns me, because when you're taking away the name of a country, you're essentially wanting to transition the identity of a country without the people accepting it and without the people voting on it. And that would be an issue for anybody, no matter where you live.
James.
I want to ask you, why is it that Jacinda Ardern gets such a free ride in the New Zealand media? I mean, you look at everything from the vaccine rollout, which has been incredibly slow, to the lockdowns, which continue, to all sorts of other issues like housing prices, which have been firing through the roof when there was a commitment to build houses that never occurred. Why does she keep getting a pass? Are you living in this weird sort of one-party state where you're just simply not allowed to criticize dear leader?
Well, I would say that it's the old saying of control the information, control the minds. And what they've got at the moment is a full control of the media. So Jacinda's paid huge amounts. There's been hundreds of millions that have been paid out for the media to try and sustain them and keep them alive. And the issue with that is that now we've got a media that is pretty much demonstrated that they will only push forward promotion of Jacinda and promotion of her ideological ideas. And it's a real issue because when we're talking about serious problems, such as the housing crisis that we have at the moment, where there was a guarantee to build 20,000 homes, and I think there's been about 980, and a lot of those have actually been purchased and not built, so they're not actually contributing to the market. Then we're seeing a real lack of follow through for any of her policies, and none of the media will bring it up. And what they do bring up is very minor when you consider the majority of the issues that we're facing. I mean, one big problem that I have seen is that we've got a real push towards gender ideology and towards allowing children from the age of 5 to choose their sex. But we've still got a huge homelessness problem. The urgent need for state housing has tripled under her in only 4 years. We've got children that are going to school without any lunches, without any shoes. We've got a mass homelessness problem. And I don't see how the decisions that she's making are beneficial to the country when you're talking about divisiveness. And the media will not pick up on that. And they're funded to not pick up on that. And it's such a shame because I think actually if they did find their own identity and if they were actually strong and courageous in presenting both sides of a narrative, then they wouldn't need government funding to stay alive, because as we've seen around the world, people are more than happy to pay and support media as long as they can see that it's honest and truthful. And unfortunately, that's not what we're getting here in New Zealand.
Wow, she speaks so well. Now that was Leighton Baker's daughter. They're like chalk and cheese. She covered the important issues that Leighton wouldn't even touch. And as you can see, most Kiwis that need to get heard these days have to go to Sky News Australia to get heard, because we don't have any truthful media in New Zealand, and we never have.